Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Backstage Pass. I'm Samantha Powell, and that's Ben Barnard. Ben, how's it going? How was your Mother's Day weekend?
Well, Mother's Day is actually on a different day in the UK. So ours was back in March, actually. And it's a good job as well because I was actually in Budapest this weekend for a bachelor party.
Wow.
So it's good that it worked out that way. Otherwise, my mother would not have been happy. But yeah, no, it was really good. Good fun. Went to the local. They have these natural hot spring spas in Budapest. So we did that. And we went and played some football or soccer. We drank some beer. We ate some local food, and yeah, good time was had by all. Obviously, it was a bachelor party though, so the bachelor in question couldn't sort of just go to the spa in the most innocent way. But we got him a lovely bikini that he wore at the spa. People
Did it say
loved it.
bachelor? It had to say something inappropriate.
No, it was just kind of like mermaid colors. Like sort of fish scale, like it was lovely.
Good.
We got there, and he had a sort of sarong on, sort of covering himself up, and then he took it off to reveal his outfit. And honestly, the place erupted. Everyone was loving it. There was a group of ladies celebrating a sort of a 50th birthday on a joint holiday. They had a photo with him. They were really interested in that, and yeah, it was really good. Got back on Sunday. Feeling a bit tired, but good night's sleep, straight back into it for work on Monday.
How long of a flight is that from where you are?
2 hours.
Okay,
Yeah, 2 hours. So it's not too bad. Yeah,
and
but it was really good.
Is this the gentleman who you're going to be officiating his wedding and not coming to InfoComm for?
It is indeed. Yes, it is. So also I was there, sort of scouting out the school friends of his who I hadn't met before, getting the stories that I can add into the speech about them. So I think I've got some decent material that he's not aware that I have. So that's going to be interesting. And then my girlfriend was on the corresponding bachelorette party as well, and so I got her to do the same. Sort of get some inside info on the bride. So yeah, it was good. But it was Mother's Day in the US this weekend. Is that correct?
It was. I had a nice low-key little nice Mother's Day here with my family in Virginia. So nothing too wild and crazy. Definitely nothing like what you were getting into in Budapest. So yeah, things are a lot more tame in Woodbridge, Virginia. So
on Mother's Day, yeah.
On Mother's Day.
I mean, I'm sure it has its moments, right?
It does. I mean, yeah. Every restaurant you go to is packed. So yeah, so trying to get like the nice Mother's Day spread, like everybody and their mother is there, obviously, trying to get food and such. But yeah, it was just a really great time just to spend it with family. And so I was really appreciative of doing that. So yeah.
Excellent, good. Well, it sounds a lot more restorative than my weekend was, but nevertheless, who have we got up first on our show today?
I had a great conversation with Ruckus. I was able to speak with Kenan and Dennis, and they really got a great opportunity to tell me about what some of their major challenges that they're seeing in the industry when it comes to AV adoption at the enterprise level and some of the technologies that they're using to help solve those problems. So they gave us a little sneak peek of what we can expect from them at InfoComm. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Let's do it.
I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by our next guests, Kenan and Dennis with Ruckus. So, hi guys, how are you doing today?
Hey there, Sam.
Hi, Sam. How are you doing? Doing good.
Fabulous. So happy that you guys are joining us. So thanks so much for taking the time. So why don't we just go ahead and kick things off? I'd really love it if you could share with our audience a little bit about Ruckus and what is your role in the AV industry?
Sure. I'll start off a little bit. So RUCKUS Networks, we're an enterprise class, high performance wireless and wired networking vendor for the AV market, but the enterprise market as a whole.
Wonderful. So let's dive in a little to about like pain points and let's go big picture. So adopting AV solutions at scale can obviously be challenging, especially for enterprise organizations. So, can you guys share with me what are some of the major challenges or pain points that you're seeing when it comes to AV adoption at the enterprise level?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think for many of our customers, right? Whether that be schools, right, universities, um, hospitality, hotels, right? Many of these customers have requirements for AV, even standard office spaces, right? Have requirements for AV, and the problem with AV is frankly that it's actually pretty difficult to set up for the average AV installer, right? If we want to classify them as that, you know, in the pro AV market, not everyone has certifications for basically IT because in the AV market when you're actually putting in whether it's a home theater for a high end home or whether it's actually a media um, closet as well as a media environment for perhaps a conference room, maybe a meeting space, maybe a convention center, right? These folks are AV experts, right, through and through, but maybe a little bit lighter on the IT side. And so often it's incumbent upon vendors, right, to provide a little bit of this out of the box, easy, one click solution so that some of the provisioning that needs to happen to configure a particular network ends up being quite easy, right? Or quite simple, right? And it's how do you abstract or how do you kind of decomplicate or not complicate or not overcomplicate basically a network install while at the same time still providing great performance. Right? That's one of the things among many things that we see within this market as our customers need.
No, absolutely. Oh, Kenan, were you going to
Yeah,
say something?
I was just going to add that, as Dennis is saying, especially with the shift and greater move into AV over IP, Ruckus has been in this wireless and wired networking space for a very long time, and experts and best in class when it comes to networking solutions. And so we had a lot of demand from our market to greater support this. Though our products could support it with the IP, we needed to make it simpler and easier for our end customers and those who are deploying the solution to be able to roll out this best in class enterprise grade AV solutions, but in a much easier form and fashion where point click and with all the right protocols to make the installation deployment, but also just ensure that it works and works every time.
There's just so much to talk about, right? Often, it gets very, very technical very, very quickly, right? Some of the things I'd often talk about, which is very well understood inside of the networking space, but less so in the AV space, is many of the AV gear, whether that be, Crestron or whether that be NDI cameras or whether that be Dante audio systems, there are certain level of expectations for how AV traffic is actually transmitted on the network that requires the network itself to be actually set up in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, what's actually pretty interesting is that enterprise class networks, right? Meaning, your standard Ethernet switch, maybe your, enterprise class Wi-Fi access point, right? That's already in a particular environment that people are repurposing for these AV installations. They actually don't come out of the box already configured to run AV traffic, right, over that particular equipment. And so often, IT administrators or AV installers are really needing to fiddle, right, with a lot of these configurations like MDNS and, IGMP snooping. And it just gets very, very wonky, very networky, very, very quickly. And unfortunately, if you're an AV expert, 20 years in the business installing, home theater systems and, supreme large convention centers and all this AV gear, that may not necessarily be your forte, right? And so it's really incumbent upon the vendors, networking vendors, to really make AV installations really out of the box easy, right?
Yeah, and just based off of what you were going over, and I'm not the most technical person, it sounds like, yeah, if they don't have the right solutions in place, like it can be really, as you said, wonky and tricky. So yeah, so we're glad Ruckus knows what to do because, yeah, that sounds like a lot of things going on. And right now, I know we're seeing some really cool trends that can really help some of those customers address some of that confusion and some of those pain points. So, what trends are you guys seeing, or emerging technologies? What is Ruckus using to help solve those enterprise level adoption challenges?
Yeah, I mean, me and Kenan are super excited to be in this particular space, right? It is a growing market for enterprise class vendors' participation to really support AV and specifically AV traffic and AV equipment out of the box, right? This pro AV market is already at by some estimates and some analysts at $300 billion. That's inclusive of these big screens, right? The things that you see, at least in the United States, like Times Square, where you go to Times Square and you look around, it's like screen after screen after screen after screen. All of that is AV, right? The entire thing is networked and it's all AV, right? And so the market is humongous. And the growth is just really, really strong. And so within that, the trends are extremely exciting for Pro AV. And then we have gear that basically is tied into that. So AV over IP as a whole is a trend where they're moving from legacy, HDMI,
Mhm.
SDI type of connectivity, where it's an end-to-end connection. It's a device encoder network, end-to-end points. And they're really making this into a much more flexible architecture where there's a very large conversion from non-IP based networks, right, to IP based networks. There's a little bit more additional complexity when you go IP, which is all the gear that provides, whether it's on the wired side or on the wireless side. But within that scope, right, this AV over IP trend, right, is a very large one. And we're very excited to be participating in that, and then really making gear that's catered towards this particular trend in this market.
That's awesome. And I know you've been doing some really interesting work in this space, some of just what you were just talking about. And I'd love to just hear a little bit more about how you're helping your customers like continue to like tackle those issues that they're having, especially, based off of, the complexities that they may be dealing with in their infrastructure. So what are you doing to help your customers overcome some of those challenges, and how can you help them stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, I think networking certainly right comes in two basic pillars of products that are at the fundamental layer when you're looking at connecting different AV gear. Right, one is of course your backbone wired Ethernet switching, right, and the infrastructure for transporting all of that traffic all around, right, on an IP network. And that wired network, right, that enterprise switch, has it been AV enabled, right? Is it AV optimized, right? And so we've done quite a lot of work over the last year and two to really make certain that when we're actually shipping out our AV Ethernet equipment, right, of which we have a portfolio of, that this particular gear is set up out of the box for AV. Now, that's only one piece of the solution, right? The switching. The second piece of that solution is really within the setup or the management of this switching fabric. Does the AV installer or even the IT administrator, who may not actually understand the AV side, but they understand the IT side, versus the AV understand the AV side, but not the IT side, it's a quite interesting set of kind of technologies as well as competencies, right, that you find out in our customer base. But do they have, and we offer this, right, simple one-click buttons right? What we call smart AV configs or AV smart configurations that allows an AV installer or even an IT administrator to go in, pull up our management interface on our switching, press a button, press a couple other buttons or very few, and then hit save, and then they're done. Meaning that if they're looking to connect, an NDI camera, if they're looking to connect a Dante audio service, if they need to do these types of configurations, often it's actually relatively complex and it actually takes a while to actually get all of the specific details by the network in the network configure to get that right. We offer within our products for our switches, right, the ability to just like single click, boom, save, boom, save, boom, save. And that simplifies not only the install because people can make mistakes, but it also, shortens the timing of that installation, which is what every administrator wants. Fast, fast,
Yes.
fast, quick, and then I'm on to the next thing.
Absolutely. And then, so you had mentioned Dante. Can you tell us just a little bit more about Ruckus's AV technical partners? I know on your website you've listed out so many of them, but how is working with them and those collaborations, how does that really help to ensure a smoother Pro AV installation?
Yeah, I think without them, right, without these partners and without the integration, and then without Ruckus's internal AV lab and test lab to make certain that the traffic is well tested and well performing, it doesn't really offer a full fledged solution. Meaning, there are off the shelf enterprise switches and off the shelf, enterprise Wi-Fi gear that aren't pre-configured for AV traffic. Specifically, let's say Dante or specifically, let's say NDI. They're just not provisioned that way.
Yeah.
Now, you could spend a lot of time configure, and in some cases, it may not actually meet the mark, right? And so, within the tool set of the administrator, that these simple, let's say Dante specifically, we're focused on that. You can press a button, you can have a best practices configuration fully loaded behind the scenes to provision a particular Ethernet port, right? That has been optimized for settings for Dante traffic. And then you click save. Now, all of that, in terms of best practice network configuration and the settings tied to that for, let's say, Dante or, for example, QSys, or, for example, any one of the protocols that we currently support natively within our switches. All of that has been worked out directly with our partners. And without the partners' involvement, it becomes very difficult. So we have a validation certification effort that we've completed early this year with Crestron, right? And so having those interoperability discussions, making sure that the products
Yeah.
actually work together between a third party and then ourselves, and then documenting that is everything for the AV customer because without that, they can't expect it to come online, immediately.
Yeah, I would just add, one of the things is, as Dennis was talking about all the different features that we have built in, we've got all these different profiles and configurations that are preset in there. Not only have we built out the lab, but we're partnered with these other companies to validate the technology on our side as well. But I think it really also comes down to the core of what Ruckus is about, is that we like to build products that are purpose driven. And so, who we are and as we design our products, we like to get to know our verticals deeply, and we try to make sure we design products that meet those needs and find the right partners that we can come alongside to make sure all those protocols are there. But really, Ruckus is about kind of enabling that delivering seamless and immersive experience. But we want to make sure it's right for our end customer. But we have it's so much part of our DNA that we really try to design it everything with a purpose. And so it's really built into our Pro AV solution with some of these new features that we're offering, and as well as protocols that are easy to select.
I think that's so fabulous that you guys have so many partners that you work with. And yes, interoperability is key. So, really excited to hear about that. And definitely checking all that information out on the website as well as in InfoComm. It's going to be an amazing thing to do. So, speaking of InfoComm, which is a couple of weeks away. It's a little overwhelming, but really excited about that. What can attendees expect to see from Ruckus at the show? Can you give us any sneak peeks or anything fun that you guys are going to have for our audience there?
Absolutely. Well, we're excited to be there. Not only Dennis and myself, but our whole Pro AV team and some of our local sales folks will be there as well. We've got a booth all set up and designed. We're going to be having some of our AV switches and some of our access points and actual hardware material there, so they can come and actually see that live and in person. And we also have the ability to set up a demo, and they can see kind of what that user experience looks like in regards to checking out those AV profiles and setting those up in our system. So they can come by and do that. And actually, if someone wants to get a more detailed meeting set up or wanted a more established demo, we're happy to schedule it ahead of time. We do have our email at proav@comscope.com. They can reach out to us and schedule a meeting if they'd like, and we're happy to give them a little bit more detailed demo. But otherwise, they can swing by the booth, check it out. We'd love to engage, learn more about what AV solutions they have, what they're deploying, and then we can kind of share what Ruckus is doing not only on the AV level, but also our broadline wireless and wired solutions, and how they're all AV optimized to support not only for our AV switches, but across the board.
All right, so now I'm going to put you on the spot. So if people want to come and stop by your booth, what is your booth number?
Yeah, so we were going to be in booth 5289. Come by the booth. Our whole team will be there, and we'd love to have an opportunity to connect with them and tell them more about Ruckus and Ruckus Pro AV.
Wonderful. Well, I'm definitely excited to stop by the booth and check out some of those demos and meet you guys in person. You have been so phenomenal, and I can't thank you enough for joining me on Backstage Pass. Kenan and Dennis, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So we'll see you soon. A huge thanks to Ruckus. It was so great speaking with Kenan and Dennis, and I can't wait to check them out at InfoComm. So, Ben, what do we have up next?
Yeah, well, fantastic conversation. And that is going to be followed by another wonderful conversation, which was had by our very own Narin, producer on this podcast. He spoke to Ryan and Keisy from Listen Technologies, and it was a really interesting conversation as well. It was all about, amongst other things, how using their technology can benefit people, not just those with hearing loss, but everyone to have a better experience in terms of the audio that they have at certain events and certain applications. So let's have a look at that interview now.
Hello everyone, this is Narin Nara, and today we're going to talk about audio. So, with the innovations in AV technology over the years, assisted listening is getting its time to shine and opening new doors on how the technology is being used in public spaces. Companies such as Listen Technologies is on the forefront of these audio innovations. And here to chat with me are two awesome people from Listen, Kasey Kaumans and Ryan Snow. How are you doing today, gentlemen?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining me, gentlemen. This is going to be awesome. I think we're going to talk about some really cool and important things. There's a lot with assistive listening technology when it comes to ADA, but we're going to talk a little bit too about how this technology can basically be applied everywhere to make sure that everyone can hear things a lot better. So let's get started. The first question I'm going to ask, I'm going to send this over to you, Kasey. But what we're going to do is we're going to ask you, why has assisted listening technologies historically been an afterthought in the AV industry? I say afterthought not because it's less important or anything, but it's just, sometimes it takes a backseat to some other things like, visuals and some other audio technologies. But what are some cultural or technological shifts that are now bringing it to the forefront?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will bring this up. Just starting off, I've spent 19 years at Listen Technologies. I was underage to order a alcoholic beverage when I started at Listen, and so I bring that story up a lot because I have seen a lot of nuances and a lot of perceptions on how assisted listening is kind of thought of in our industry. Not to say it's always an afterthought, but oftentimes once you get to it, we all know, being in the AV industry, that this is usually the very last thing before a building opens up after construction, right? So, budgets are very something that is hypersensitive towards what is being involved, what's being used. So when we see the whole kind of fruition of a project, if there's going to be a change order or something that gets removed, sometimes people have the benefactor kind of have the thought of, what, rather than assisted listening devices, what about if we just crank the stereo system up louder? Or what about if we just have the person that might be hard of hearing sit in maybe the first row? So I've kind of heard in my tenure a lot of the different stories. So that's part of it. And part of it is, and I don't want to use a lot of puns here, but when you talk about accessibility and assisted listening for accessibility, it really wasn't that accessible. So if someone does have hearing difficulties, whether they're going to a house of worship or they're going to their own performant local theater, or even a student in a classroom, it's kind of a convoluted process sometimes. If someone were to go and ask for a receiver, there's might be a collateral system involved behind it. It's just kind of it's not really just straightforward. So sometimes people kind of just say, all right, I'm going to be okay with missing every other word or every third word. And that's just how this is going to be. So part of what your question was about, kind of what's the evolution of technology, the power is kind of in our phones. So I have, we all have them right now. So that was kind of our first kind of door opening mechanism of realizing if someone could just leverage their own smart device, that is a huge step in itself. Now, the other part of it is like, what's the technology chassis behind it? Is it over audio over Wi-Fi? And then kind of the main one that we're really kind of focusing on, want to kind of bring to the forefront today is RUCKUS, which is the Bluetooth broadcast one-to-many communication protocol that they have. So that's the main focus point of what we're looking at, and why it's such a powerful technology is just because it is going to provide essentially a Bluetooth broadcast feed to anywhere in the world. And I mean, it's really cool how it's going to end up being kind of integrated into all of our normal devices. So that's the quintessential key, is making sure it's accessible, but making sure it's easy to access, whether it's within someone's hearing aid, whether it's in someone else's consumer device like an AirPod or an earbud. But more importantly, it's going to be in the power of what we already have and carry on our own personal self each day.
That's awesome. Now, let's talk a little bit about Auracast and the technology behind it. So, I'm gonna throw this one over to you, Ryan. Maybe tell me a little bit more about Auracast and how might technologies like that and native phone integration redefine accessibility, not just for people with hearing loss, but for anyone who's in a noisy or a public environment.
Great question. And I feel like Casey might know a lot more of the technical aspects of Auracast better than I would. But
Don't sell yourself short.
yeah, I mean, I won't. But I do think that Auracast Bluetooth is a technology that is one to many. So Bluetooth Classic is currently one to one. So you have, your Apple Watch or your earbuds. It's just a connection of one to one. Now, Auracast will have a transmitter that can transmit to multiple devices. And so I think that technology like Auracast can remove barriers with audio accessibility. I, for one, am hard of hearing, so I wear hearing aids. And throughout my, college experience, I was always so intimidated to let organizations know or teachers know that I was hard of hearing, because then you'd have to check out a device. It's just more of like a process, and it's an intimidating one. And so Auracast takes one of that step out of the equation, where it's everything, directly to your hearing aids. It's directly to your phone. It's directly to your earbuds. And so I think direct access to that audio will deepen the engagement. For example, neurodivergent individuals can customize their audio experience. And so the Auracast technology can make all environments more user-friendly, but it also creates a more personalized listening experience. Casey can add to more of the technical aspects of that, though, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing too. Is Auracast is going to, what we've already seen is it's such a viable technology. I mean, we really are kind of pioneering, Bluetooth as an organization is the one that's behind Auracast. Our line that we just came out with about a month and a half ago is called Ari. So we released that in the mid-April timeframe, and it's on that technology chassis. I say that because, in the last year, when I've been kind of just going around, quizzing all these different venues on how they facilitate their assisted listening. More importantly, here's the kind of the big anecdote is, we've worked on so many projects historically. I follow up later and say, how many people have asked for an assisted listening device? You had to get 20 for say to meet ADA compliance here. Are all 20 being used? That answer is always zero. I mean, there's always going to be few that use it, but it's never going to be, oh, we don't have all 20 that are using this. We just got the 20 receivers for assisted listening to meet ADA compliance. What is happening, though, is kind of what Ryan alluded to, is with the adoption of these new technologies, the stigma is less than a stigma now. It's more acceptable. But again, being able to just access something directly on your phone or your own AirPods, or even if you are tethering your hearing aid, as Ryan does, to his phone, it's a completely different conversation. It's much easier to facilitate. So I've already seen, firsthand observation where, you might average maybe 1 or 2 users for a performance or during a lecture. And now that's shot up to, 12 or 13. And then we're not talking just about assistive technology for just venues that are for people that are hard of hearing. RUCKUS can go into a lot of different new venues where just the simple essence of wireless broadcast audio in maybe a louder environment, such as an airport or other types of environments like you can imagine, it's hard to listen to audio that's being broadcasted. So this is really, in my opinion, kind of the first wireless technology that can encapsulate that. And that's why I think this is something that we're onto something really exciting here.
Yeah, I think the participants will be surprised by how much they are not hearing. Hard of hearing or not, I think in any kind of environment, noisy or not, I think that the adoption of RUCKUS will shock people with how much more they can get out of, a concert, a venue, or even school.
That's awesome. That sounds like it's super useful. And you mentioned airport, and that made me think about something. Have you guys ever missed a flight before?
Many. I've had an
Okay.
overnight trip in an airport before. I've seen the sun rise and set on one day on one airport before. So yes.
Well, that makes me feel pretty good because that means I'm not the only one. But yeah, there was one time where I was at an airport and I learned that my flight was delayed. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go grab some food real quick. I come back and there was like a huge crowd. Still says it's delayed. I was like, I'm just going to sit away from the gate, have a meal, just relax a little bit. I get up, I walk towards the gate and it was empty. And I'm like, what happened? And turns out they already boarded. And I was like,
Oh,
wait, normally I try to pay attention to the gate warnings, right? Like gates closing soon. Please hurry up. You're going to miss your flight if you don't get to the gate.
yeah.
I didn't hear any of that because it was a loud environment. It was very difficult to hear anything. There was a lot of chaos around the gates and all of that. It was kind of like that hub and spoke design of a
Yeah.
airport. So like it was just a huge crowd of people. So I couldn't hear anything.
Yeah.
So that kind of reminds me of how a technology like this can be useful in kind of distributing the sound, because sometimes you can't just rely on just cranking up the sound because people will get
Right.
louder, right? When you
Exactly.
have something similar to the technology that you mentioned, I think that's going to really help people understand things a little better and actually pay attention, like in my case.
100%.
So I use that as a perfect example of the airport. So sorry that happened to you first and foremost. But I think it happens to all of us that travel for. You haven't learned your way in life until you get canceled on a flight or miss one.
Absolutely.
But, that does, the airport scenario you just brought up brings up exactly why. Because in some aspects, some venues are kind of thinking, oh, do we really need to distribute this audio? Who really needs to listen to this? And so that's like a perfect example where this is going. Is there's a lot of times where, historically speaking, there's never been a thought or consideration to what the audio broadcast should be in that given space because the technology simply hasn't been there. So now we're evolving just with what is available here. And that's a perfect example. I think you wouldn't be the first one. I wouldn't be the first one where if I'm sitting in an airport and I know that I could just hop onto my phone and put an AirPod in my ear and listen to the gate announcements while I'm kind of at the checkout of, the cafeteria or whatever might have you. That's a really, really perfect epitome of where this is going.
Absolutely. It's just connecting us to the venue essentially, and
Yep.
just adding that extra layer of connectivity that will make sure that you're constantly in the know of some of the information that's coming your way. So it's actually pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do want to talk a little bit about how this technology is moving forward, basically. So I do want to talk a little bit about standards. So, Casey, let's talk a little bit about the audio standards here. So, what
Yeah.
barriers still exist when it comes to accelerating the adoption of universal broadcast audio standards?
So that's a very good point. Where we stand today, in the first week in May in 2025, RCast has the technology minimum to be able to be ADA compliant. So we're already there. ADA compliancy specifically doesn't have a call out for technology. It has a small kind of frequency response threshold that was made in the 90s that it obviously hits, and it does have to cover an entire area. So from ADA legislation, it stands there. But as far as the proliferation and future adoption of Auracast, we're already seeing it in hearing aids. There are a few hearing aid manufacturers that already have this. You could go and get one today, just like how Ryan has. Most audiologists, when you go to them and say, do you know what Arcast is? They'll say, yes, we have a catalog we could offer you. So that's already happening in the hearing aids because it is a proper fit for a hearing aid. So they've already seen that for a while and are moving forward with that expeditiously. The big elephant in the room here is obviously, when is it going to come into our consumer devices? When's it going to get into Apple iOS or Google OS or Android OS? Sorry, and like I said, as of currently right now, we are have a kind of a game plan for Samsung's and Google's, and Android 16 is where they're going to start opening that up on. So by the summer in 2025 here, we're already going to start seeing this natively available on Google phones. As far as Apple, I would imagine they're still kind of I mean, if you follow Apple's and how they do their release, sometimes they might not do it until the week before. So who knows? It could be, by the time this podcast airs, Apple might have an announcement out, and then there might be a time where it might be later this summer. But the main thing is it's inevitable. They both have embraced it. They've both addressed that it is going to be a very integral part of their OS moving forward. It's going to be part of not just natively on their phones, but it's going to be on AirPods, and Samsung already has Auracast wireless earbuds that you could purchase. So they're already kind of moving forward. That's where all the signs of this are going. And so even in a few years from now, I keep saying my joke that I keep talking about is go, have you heard of Auracast? Right. And then, usually it's a mixed yes or no. Most of the time right now it's no, what is that? And I go, well, maybe you should owe me money because it's going to be a household name soon. So I'm privileged to be the first one to tell you about it. So that's how I feel because, we do have a good rapport with the Bluetooth organization, and we are fully invested with them in terms of kind of a partnership. And, they definitely have plans to have this on all of our consumer devices, not just our phones, but TVs in the future, tablets, you name it. So this is definitely going to be a pretty widespread thing, and it's going to proliferate really quickly here in the next couple of years.
One also, I think a barrier that's not mentioned very often is an end user's experience with Bluetooth Classic. I feel like some end users associate Bluetooth maybe with some latency. And so when you see Auracast enabled or Auracast Bluetooth, you might think, oh, is there going to be like a poor audio quality? It's completely different than that. Like the Auracast transmission is crystal clear. It's so quick. There's very minimal latency. And so changing the stigma for end users who use Bluetooth Classic will probably be a little bit of a barrier to kind of educate and have people experience that audio quality for the first time and realize it's not the same.
Correct. Yep.
Gotcha. Very cool. Very cool. So Ryan, while you're on the line, I do want to ask you, as someone who uses the product, how does it feel from a user's perspective to experience the difference that modern assistive listening technology such as Auracast direct to your hearing aid?
It is transformative. I feel like the only other experience I have with direct to hearing aid audio would be with induction loops and T-coils. And it's It's a fine experience. I'm not going to talk negatively about loops because they're so widely known, but I feel like it's not very customizable. It's not the best sound quality, and it's not always user friendly. Especially for the venue too. Like they have to install, these induction loops and these copper wires throughout their whole building. Where our cast it's almost like a plug and play, where it's just super easy to install. It's super easy for end users to access, and then the sound quality is, like I said, transformative. And as a hearing aid user, like I mentioned, I've always been very not ashamed, but like intimidated to ask for an assistive listening device at a movie theater or at a classroom, So I just remember like the experience of getting Bluetooth Classic hearing aids was so incredible to me, to be able to answer my phone through my hearing aids or listen to my music, not needing anything else. So I just know the adoption of RCast is going to be a game changer, especially with the crisp and personalized audio that you can tweak and customize for yourself. So
Indeed, indeed. Now, both of you guys mentioned smartphone integrations and devices and all of that. So, Casey, what I want to ask you now is what could making assistive listening features a default in devices such as TV, earbuds, and smartphones? Can that actually transform public perception from it being an accessibility tool over to mainstream convenience?
Absolutely. We've already seen this. I've had a couple firsthand stories of just they have one of my favorite stories actually is so there's a pretty large MLB stadium that I've been working with, and they've had the RF devices for a while that they had just for legislation, and they started adopting this technology, and they actually have a portion of it on the back of the ticket stub, which I know most of them are digital now. You could still get the tickets, but they're actually talking about it and correlating it back to like a fan experience. And that's kind of what this is. I mean, this is kind of the elephant, the low hanging fruit of like a baseball stadium, because people still bring transistor radios to listen to the play by play in baseball stadiums. But I just think that's such a cool story because, again, it shows the evolution right in front of us of where this has gone as a technology, where it's used to be something where you have a foreign headset that you have to go ask about, and then it's it assisted listening RF feed, so it's not necessarily the best audio equivalent to what some of us may perceive. Now you're looking at high fidelity audio that could happen in real time with zero latency, essentially. And it makes it so much easier being able to just access it that way. So we're already seeing that shift happen. And it's, like I said, it's going to continue to happen on all of our devices very quickly here.
I also think I would compare it to like closed captions. Like I know so many of my fully hearing friends, watch TV shows, watch shows, movies with closed captions, and it makes their experience so much better. I feel like our cast is going to be similar to that, where it just improves what you're currently doing. So if it is adaptable or, enforced on your phone or your TVs or whatever it may be, it's just going to make that experience so much better.
It's great that you brought that up because I started watching shows and stuff with the captionings on too, right?
Oh yeah,
because
And you
I
add
feel like
so much more.
yeah. It honestly, like, I actually saw a video or something once about how movies back in the day with like that audio quality was easier to listen to than movies these days because of like how they're trying to make sound more dynamic, right? So
wow, yeah.
when people are talking, it almost like when they're mumbling, it just sounds like, and you're
Yeah,
like, what is he saying? But they're doing that for dramatic effect, and it just makes things a little difficult sometimes. So
yeah,
the captioning help.
Yeah.
So
totally.
I feel like if there's something that can help boost that audio, something like what you guys offer, right? I think that would be pretty cool.
Right, yeah.
For sure. I mean,
Absolutely.
I watched Game of Thrones the first round without any closed captions, and then my wife wanted to watch it, and I added the closed captions, and I was like, I'm picking up so much more of the storyline than I thought, and I just feel like the adoption of RCast is going to be similar, where you're going to be surprised by how much you're not hearing.
That's right. That's right. So you mentioned baseball, you mentioned other like larger venues and stuff. So let's kind of wrap up here and take a
Yeah.
look at the big picture from the AV industry perspective. So obviously this is, I think, something that AV professionals should consider when they're planning out their projects and all of that, just because we already talked about there's the ADA benefit, but there's also that enhanced, in baseball's case, fan experience, in the case of airports, consumer experience, all of that, right? So what role should AV professionals play when educating clients and the public about all of these emerging tools?
That's a very good point. And again, this kind of, I've said this a couple times already just on this call today alone. The perception of assisted listening used to be backed primarily and fundamentally just to be ADA compliant, just to meet a legality obligation, right? And while that still is prevalent with ADA compliance, I think the role that AV professionals play and what we've already seen is being able to be proud of their work, right? So there's the sophistication on just an entire AV project has been such a huge stretch today than what it was even, a decade ago, for instance. And so part of that is that could be with Auracast kind of a continuation of what they've done. So that's how I've actually been working with it in a few performing arts centers where they have such an elaborate AV infrastructure already. And it's amazing. And it's kind of like, well, if somebody is a little bit hard of hearing, don't you want to also kind of have what you've created already transcend to them? Auracast is the vehicle to do that, or Ari specifically. And so that's where it's been a huge turn. I said it a minute ago about fundamentally or historically, assisted listening devices are usually on kind of like a mid-level audio level, right? And so they're kind of specifically tailored. So you don't have a lot of highs, a lot of lows. They're tailored specifically for historically spoken word for those that are hard of hearing. So people that have hard of hearing need assisted listening, that's fine for them. But when someone that isn't, they listen to an assisted listening system historically, they go, yeah, I can hear it, but it's nothing like if I was listening to like a Spotify's channel or a podcast, right? But now that's changing. You could do the assisted listening part of the spoken word, they could hear that fine, but you can incorporate everything else that goes on with the genius of a conventional project that has a lot of good AV infrastructure and just kind of extend that to them. So I think that's where, as a role, it's kind of just championing. This isn't just assisted listening. This is really kind of creating an entirely new wireless audio ecosystem in so many different venues. There's no market that I couldn't see where this couldn't be a benefit for just that pragmatic purpose alone. So that's where I really like this.
Absolutely. Brian, do you have any thoughts on what AV pros should be doing?
No, I mean, I just agree with everything Casey says. I just think that education is so important, and I think that inclusivity is just so much more than just a buzzword right now. I feel like, empowering venues to offer those experiences is so important, and it's more than just, a buzzword.
Well, gentlemen, I learned a lot today about Auracast and about listening technologies, and I hope everybody listening to this do as well. Where can everybody find you on the socials, on the network, if you got that on hand?
Yeah, definitely. So we are easy to find. We are www.listentech.com. Ryan, I believe we have a dedicated RE page too, if you want to know more about what we're just doing in the Auracast landscape. Is that correct?
That is correct. So it's listentech.com /RE.
Yeah.
And all of the educational information you can find to learn more about Auracast and how it works.
Yep. And all our socials, we're also Listen Tech across the board. And that's tech like TECH. So our LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all the same. So come find us, come check us out.
Yeah, easy to find.
Perfect. Casey, Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a good one.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you. Cool.
So thank you to Narin there for another great conversation with Listen Technologies. Their booth sounds really interesting, as does Ruckus. So be sure if you're at the show this year to check both of those out. But what have we got on next week's show, Sam?
Well, we've got another amazing episode, of course. So on our next show, we've got Crestron, who's going to be talking about the 3 C's: content, collaboration, and control. So really looking forward to that conversation.
Absolutely. Sounds good. So Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure as always, but we have unfortunately come to the end of another episode of Backstage Pass. But I look forward to seeing you on the next one. I look forward to seeing our viewers and our listeners on the next one too. But for now, for this episode of Backstage Pass, I'm Ben Barnard, that's Samantha Powell, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.
See you soon.